Good evening and welcome to the May 9th meeting of the Silicon Valley Microsoft Fabric Meetup Group. I'm Mark Ginnebaugh. I'm the organizer of this group and also of the San Francisco Microsoft Data Fabric Meetup Group. And I'm joined this evening by Elizabeth Oldag of Microsoft, who will speak on how to eliminate data silos with OneLake, the OneDrive for data. Our agenda for this evening is as follows. I'll give a very brief intro, roughly 5 minutes, then we'll jump right into Elizabeth's presentation. She'll speak for about an hour, and then there'll be time left after that for questions and answers. And during the presentation, if you have questions, you can put them into the meeting's chat, and I'll be happy to moderate, and Elizabeth will provide answers as she goes. But before we do that, we have some interesting upcoming meetings. On May 21st, we have Scott Helmer speaking on Power BI and Visio, visualizing data for a theme park. This will be an interesting example of how you could use Visio or a similar application as a front end to Power BI. And Scott is a Microsoft Visio MVP and co-inventor of TaskMap. Then on June 12th, Reza Red's topic is Fast and Furious Power BI Direct Lake in Fabric. Reza is a very well-known Power BI expert, Microsoft Regional Director, and MVP, and he'll be presenting from New Zealand. On June 18th, we'll change it up a bit with a lunchtime meeting. Nicola Illick's topic is The Hitchhiker's Guide to Mastering the Fabric Analytics Engineering Certificate DP600. He'll be sharing tips and strategies on how you can get prepared to take and pass that exam and complete your DP 600 certification. Nicola will be presenting to us from his home in Salzburg, Austria. This evening's presentation is being recorded and will be available along with recordings from many earlier meetings, and you can find them at designmind.com/videos. They're available free for the community. And now I'm happy to introduce Elizabeth Oldag, our speaker for this evening. Elizabeth is a principal product manager leading Microsoft's OneLake team. In this capacity, she works with customers and engineers to deliver the best experiences and technical innovations in big data storage and analytics. Elizabeth has 10 years experience owning features, overseeing cross-function teams, and reporting business and technical information. And Elizabeth holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Physics from the University of Texas at Austin. And I'll turn things over now to Elizabeth Oldag. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you very much, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be invited to talk to you all, and excited to discuss things, hear questions, so please definitely do. Put any questions in the chat, and I can pause and we can talk about it as we go. And we get my slides starting to show here. So yeah, I'm here today to give you a broad overview of like what is OneLake, what are the value propositions of OneLake, what are the key features. And so this is, hopefully you'll walk away with a good understanding of how OneLake fits into Fabric and some of those features that you should be trying out. So to get started, I'm assuming like everyone has had some exposure to Fabric and understands it's our unified data platform for data analytics. So it's bringing the best of many worlds together, the powerful engines and Synapse and the great SaaS platform of Power BI, and bringing that together and making this cohesive, unified data analytics platform. But like one of the things that we emphasize is a key part of Fabric is that it's lake-centric and open. And this is kind of a unique thing that's not always talked about when you talk about data analytics. Sometimes the data lake or the storage layer is kind of it's the foundation or a secondary component to the analytics side. But really in Fabric, it's baked into the whole platform and the whole offering. And to kind of walk you through how we got to this vision, let me start with kind of well, and first of all, we want OneLake is the OneDrive for data. That's what we're saying. As easy as it is to store documents in OneDrive, we want OneLake to be your place for your data. But let me start kind of looking back at data lakes in general. When we were thinking of how does a data lake fit into this unified data analytics platform, we were thinking, okay, what's the expectations of data lakes? Data lakes, have been around for many years, over 10 years, and it was seen as it's a place where you can have all of your data across your organization land in one place. There's no requirement on the format of data, so you can store all different file formats, unstructured, semi-structured, unstructured data in one place. And you can, write it first, get insights from it later. You weren't so confined that you had to have all of your data in a very, clean state where you already knew how you were going to use it. It's like bring your data in, blend it, analyze it together, find those data insights, and get the value out of this data. And the data lake, if you have a place where you can put everything, then, the goal is that you have ability to now
companies to truly address this problem.
Simplify security, governance, and discover this data more easily. But, in reality, it's not easy to build a data lake because you have a lot of components you need to put together. It's like a pattern you're building on top of storage accounts, and you don't get it out of the box. So we like to compare it to what it was like to share files prior to SaaS products like Dropbox and OneDrive. If you want to do file sharing before, you had to provision, servers, build your folder structure and set ACLs, and then you got to the point where you were sharing your files out. But then when SaaS products came along, you just simply, got right to the job that you were trying to do and share the data out. And so what we're, bringing with OneLake is that SaaS version of data lakes. And there's so many parts of kind of what a data lake vision is. I'm going to kind of walk you through a few different aspects that explains how we are making this a SaaS product. But before, one of the other pain points, I think, building data lakes today is that an organization will have many different teams operating within that organization, and they'll land their data in their storage accounts or other storage locations, and it might be in the same cloud, it might be across clouds, but now you have data in different places and you want to start blending that data together, analyzing it. So then you're going to make copies of data, and you're going to start having to manage those copies of data, manage the pipelines, and making sure the data is fresh and accurate. So that, that's one layer. It's possible to do it, but it's going to take time to kind of, manage and organize the data, make sure it's secured and governed. And not only that, this is like the bottom layer of storing your data, but often applications don't actually consume the data directly from the data lake layer. Often they have to go into a separate storage service, which is like databases or marts or cubes. That's where the application might be serving the data. So now you have copies of data that you're having to manage, and then copies of that data that you're managing across the top consumption layer as well. So, having this one pristine data lake is not really the pattern we were seeing in reality. And I think hopefully several of you on the call could relate to this kind of diagram, painting just how much effort it is to have your data in the right form, in the right location, joining with other data across an organization. And so we're going to walk through kind of the steps in OneLake that help kind of solve these core scenarios and simplify building a data lake. So to start with, I like this slide because it really, if you're also new to Fabric, it kind of gives you a great image of Fabric having all these different engines on top, all natively integrating with the OneLake layer, as the foundation. And OneLake is not something you go to Fabric and you create. You automatically will have OneLake, and you only have one OneLake per tenant. So we like to joke, you can't have 2 lakes, you can't have 0 lakes. We named it OneLake because you have one. And the fact that it's tied to your tenant means that you now have a boundary for your organization of seeing all of the data that's being stored in your organization in OneLake. You have a tenant admin that can manage, out of the box settings and controls to help make sure that your policies for your organization are applied to all of the data that's being stored in your OneLake. And you can track things, like data lineage, you can set data protection labels, integrate with different catalogs. All of that will be available on a tenant boundary because it's now the SaaSified product. But we don't want to make a tenant admin the gatekeeper for someone to be able to use OneLake and bring data in. So within OneLake, we have these workspaces, and the same workspaces you'll be familiar with using Power BI before. And these workspaces are where each team can manage what data they're storing and they're processing related to their projects or their domain. And you can have different workspace admins. You can set access control within the workspace. You tie it to a capacity which has a region associated with it, and you tie it to a capacity for billing as well. So now you have like these different kind of layers to manage the security across the organization, but also allow the different parts within your company independently work together, and you still have visibility into the data in the workspace. So there's another feature, and I didn't touch upon it too much yet, but one of the big architecture patterns in data lakes that's really empowers teams within your organization to get the most out of their data is the data mesh pattern. And data mesh means that you have the domain owners being able to control and manage the data that they're experts on. And they're not, like an alternative would be having to go through like a central IT team who may not be experts on the data, but they're the ones, who are kind of deciding how the data gets, stored, different policies on the data, and that can slow down the rate of, productivity of having like a single core team in your organization handling all of the data in your data lake. In the data mesh pattern, you are able to empower all the different business units to develop, the systems that work for them and be, kind of empowered them to have the data they need and process it as they need it. And what we did with OneLake was actually make this data mesh pattern into features that enable you to easily build this data mesh pattern. So we have this domains feature, which allows you to actually group workspaces together and tag them as a domain. So you can say like, this is the sales domain workspaces, the marketing domain, or the finance domain. And then you can have admins on those domains so that they can also set certain policies, and they can be the ones who can certify different data, can classify data and control how those workspaces get assigned to their domains. And so you have now another way to organize your data between the tenant admin and the workspace admin with this domains feature as well. And the goal here is like, a lot of times when you hear about, okay, you want to allow people to create workspaces and start putting data in, you think, oh, it's just going to turn into a mess and a data swamp. And, I really want to control it and lock it down. I don't want to have just the wild, wild west out here. This feature of domains starts letting you have more confidence that this data is being managed and governed by the domain admin who's an expert on this data and has clear understanding of the data and is organizing it, and you're able to certify or promote data, and that keeps it so the data that should be trustworthy rises to the top, and then data that you're not so sure about, you at least can see the data is there, and the domain admin can say, oh, I want to look at this and make this into a certified data set. But they they still have the ability to kind of govern and see the data. So we don't want people to, if you prevent people from writing data into OneLake, we think they'll go around the system and write it somewhere else and get their job that they need to do done. What we want to do is encourage it to go into OneLake, but then you make sure that you can have the tools so that this data is the data that's been certified and we should use it in our workloads, or this is a new data set that someone's experimenting with, but it's not ready for anybody to take any dependencies on yet, or oh, this one looks like it's being used by a lot of teams. I should get some IT help in here to make sure it's being done in a hardened way that we can start using it for more production dependencies. I hope that helped. And I don't know if there are any questions at this point. Let me just take a check here.
None have been posted yet.
Okay. Let me see. I see one about how
I take that back. Himanshu just posted his question. How is this grouped from Azure subscription or resource group?
Okay. Yeah. So really where it's overlapped is in the capacity model, the billing model, because you don't interact with OneLake or Fabric in Azure at all, except for creating a capacity. So you can buy two types of Fabric capacities. There's the premium SKU, that's like the ones that were in the Power BI world, and then there's the Fabric SKU, which is the one that you get by going to your Azure subscription, and you can search for Fabric and create a Fabric capacity SKU. And then once you have that capacity, you go into fabric.microsoft.com in the Power BI world, and then you just start creating workspaces underneath that capacity. So the subscription enables you to create the capacity, but all of the groupings and other concepts in Fabric are separate than the Azure concepts. So in Fabric, you'll have the AAD tenant, domains, workspaces, and then data items, which I have a slide that I'll talk about next. Yeah, on this slide, I am going to kind of bring up the fact that we're building this logical OneLake. And when you think of OneLake, you often think, well, I have requirements to store data in specific regions. I need multiple data lakes. Well, we are, under the hood provisioning storage resources for you, and we will store your data in resources in specific regions according to your needs. So when you buy a capacity, it's in a certain region, and then when you create those workspaces that are associated with that capacity, that data will be stored in that same region. So you can still have OneLake for your organization and have some data stored in EU and some data stored in the US, but it all looks like one logical OneLake. And since we provision the storage resources for you, which is ADLS Gen 2 accounts underneath the hood of OneLake, we're able to, create the right amount of resources to meet your needs for scale. So, we are providing you the ability to scale up your capacity, your throughput, and IOPS as your workload needs it, because we are able to be more flexible in the back end and create those storage accounts for you. And you don't have to worry about those limits or manage anything about those accounts. All you see are your workspaces in OneLake. And right now, when you create a workspace, your data is automatically in zone redundant storage. So that gives you higher data availability and durability, because your data is going to be stored in multiple data centers within a region. And we have an option on the capacity for you to enable geo redundancy as well, if you want to protect your data against a region disaster. So that was a feature that came out last November as well. So that touches on scale. Let me see if there are any questions. All right, stored in Azure data centers. Yep, all of our Fabric regions are tied to Azure regions. There's sharing the same core infrastructure, so they are definitely tied together. All right, and how in my earlier slide I was mentioning how you have data that's stored in the data lake layer, and then you often have to copy it out to another layer for consuming the data. Well, in OneLake and in Fabric, what we are providing is your ability to actually consume all that data directly from OneLake. So you don't have to copy data into another storage location just to run a certain type of compute over it. So we call this real separation of compute and storage. You store one copy of your data and you can access it from multiple engines. And so you might be wondering, like, okay, how is this possible? Well, it's all due to the fact that all of these engines have been re-architected in many cases to consume data in the Delta Lake Parquet format. So that's the open standard format that you're probably familiar with, especially if you're using Databricks. That is the format that all of our compute engines have been optimized now to work on top of. So that was, a huge investment for many of the different engines. And what this means is that once you have your data in Delta Lake format, it can now, for example, be read by Spark and SQL or analysis services at the same time. So if you're a data engineer, and see if I have another build-up slide. Say you're a data engineer and you want to write your data through Spark, and it will write it through Spark and create the Delta Lake tables. You can then query it through the T-SQL endpoint and be able to run T-SQL queries over it. And then you can build Power BI reports on top of it as well with analysis services. Or similarly, another case is if you want to use the data warehouse engine to write the data with T-SQL, you can write that data, and then you can run Spark notebooks and consume that data because it's all in Delta Parquet, or run a Power BI report on top of that as well. So you now have the flexibility to pick whichever engine maybe that person is most familiar with, or what's most applicable to the job you're trying to do, without having to make duplicates of the data. It's all being served off the same copy, so it's always, consistent. It's always fresh, and that's one of the core features of Fabric, is having all of the data standardized on Delta Parquet. And I'll have a couple of demos in a couple slides to also show how this looks in a demo. But I also want to mention that this data in OneLake is not confined to just being consumed by Fabric engines or even Microsoft engines. You can use non-Microsoft engines, because we are a data lake. We want it to be open and accessible. And like I mentioned, it's built on top of ADLS. And one thing we wanted to do was support the same ADLS APIs and SDKs, so that we can, out of the box, use the existing ADLS applications on top of OneLake. So if you're using Databricks or Azure Storage Explorer or Informatica or other third-party tools, you can simply refer to your data like you would in an ADLS account, but now your account name is just OneLake and your container name is the workspace name, and then the folder underneath that would be your item name and the item type. So you're able to access this data from any open system. And if you ever run into any issues with accessing data in OneLake, definitely reach out, because we intend for this to work on all systems. If there's potentially, we've hit a couple roadblocks where someone's validating the URL has to be the ADLS URL and not OneLake, and that's always usually a simple fix. But other than that, all of the APIs and SDKs will work on top of data in OneLake.
So there's a
Yeah.
question that was posed along these lines, and that was whether it works well with streaming data, such as Kafka, event hubs, etc.
So, I mean, it has the performance characteristics of data lakes in general. So, it's really best for those like high throughput over large data sets where you're just, churning through data and, trying to get insights from large data. And, with streaming, I think that's usually, done in a different sort of architecture, but of course, like writing the data out into OneLake for processing by Spark notebooks or warehouses is a scenario that will definitely be supported on OneLake. But yeah, we have our data, like real-time analytics system, and I'm trying to see Data Factory here. They're all able to write data into OneLake. So you still have that same capabilities of doing the streaming data and then have the output be written into OneLake. I hope that helps. Let me know if there's any other questions. All right, so I have some recordings of kind of how it looks to be in working on top of OneLake. So here is the experience you're familiar with in Power BI. You go and you create a workspace, and here in this workspace, we already have a warehouse created. That's one of the item types. And when you open the warehouse, it's going to look very familiar to any SQL management studio. Here you have schemas, you have tables, and you can preview the data. But this is all being stored in OneLake. And so if I go to a application we have called OneLake File Explorer, I can easily show you what this looks like in OneLake. So if you haven't heard of it, we have OneLake File Explorer for Windows. This is it shows you all your data in OneLake like it does with OneDrive. It's a very Windows focused experience. And when you open it up, you'll see the name OneLake, and then you'll see all of the workspaces that you have access to will show up as folders, because that's how the namespace is organized. You have the tenant level OneLake, and then you have all the workspaces underneath, which are just folders. And so if I open the workspace for this warehouse I'm showing, and I open up the item, which is a folder under the workspace, then I'll see the folders that are storing the tables. I'll go to the schema, go to the table name, and I think first I'm going to run a SQL query to write data into the table or create a new table, and then I'll see it appear in my OneLake File Explorer. And underneath, I'll see Parquet files for the data, and I'll see the Delta log for the metadata. So this is really illustrating the fact that you have a warehouse experience, and it's all being driven off of Delta tables underneath, which you can see through a few different experiences, but the OneLake File Explorer is the easiest way to see it. And then any other engine that understands Delta Lake, Databricks or any other service would see this as just a normal Delta table. It's nothing proprietary or anything special for consuming the data. Any other engine can consume it. Okay, and then let's go into the next part. So here I'm going to create a new lakehouse. A lakehouse is the most data lake kind of item because it's where you can store data of any different file, of any different format, because we have a file section and a table section. And what you're going to see here is in File Explorer, I see that new item that I just created. And what I want to do is I want to put some unstructured data in my lakehouse. And an example of unstructured data is some image. Oops, I think I jumped ahead accidentally. Let's try this again. Okay, here's Lakehouse. I say I have some images that I've stored locally on my machine that I want to bring into the Lakehouse. I can just simply go to my folder locally, copy and paste it into my Lakehouse. And then if I go back to the Fabric portal and refresh it, I see those images there instantly because it's syncing it directly to OneLake service. And so under my Lakehouse, I can store unstructured data under the file section. And then tables data is where you would put the structured data that's in Delta Lake format. So let me show you the next video here. So here we're going to show the open access that I was mentioning before. Every file and folder in OneLake can be referred to by a ABFS path or the HTTP path. And here we're copying the ABFS path to the tables folder in this Lakehouse. And then I'm going to take that path. And then in a Databricks notebook, which I had already written for reading some data and writing some data into a storage account, I'm going to copy and replace that path to that storage account and put in my OneLake path. So I have my workspace name and I have my item name. And then I can just rerun that same script. And it's going to use that location to output the new data that I'm writing in this Databricks notebook. And then if I go back to my Lakehouse and I refresh it, I'll see all of these tables that Databricks wrote out, but to Fabric, they look like any other table that I might have written with Fabric Spark or with Data Warehouse. They're still recognized as tables. You can preview them. All the metadata is being discovered, even though it was written by an engine outside of Fabric. So that helps demonstrate the open access of OneLake as well.
So there's been some discussion in chat about the embedding of in File Explorer, which people like, and that there's a question from Dan about how with OneLake, how do organizations kind of segregate, or how do they work with development, staging, and production data sets?
Got it. Okay. So from my knowledge, and there may be gaps in my knowledge in this one, and there's been a lot of focus on this area, so there may be features coming out that I'm not plugged into, but you do have the the concepts of workspaces and items where you can separate out your different stages of your workload. So you could have different lake houses for dev use cases and prod use cases and different workspaces as well. I mean, those are like some of the building blocks that I think would play into that sort of dev, stage, prod architecture, but I would probably want to follow up to get you some better clarity on this one. So it's not top of mind for me at the moment, but it's a good question.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, if we can follow up afterwards, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Right. Okay. So we went over some of the core basic concepts of what OneLake is in Fabric, the one copy concept, and how you can bring in data with our open access APIs. But there's other ways that you can bring in data and also blend data within OneLake, and that's the feature called OneLake Shortcuts, and that's the section I want to go into next. So OneLake Shortcuts is really exciting. They're an ability for you to virtualize your data and create what's essentially a symbolic link from one copy of data to multiple items or workspaces. So think of it just like a Windows shortcut or Linux symbolic link. You're making a reference to your data. And when you do this in OneLake, that data looks and feels like it's stored natively in that item. And so it's giving you the ability to consolidate data, share data without having to change the ownership of the data, without having to duplicate the data. And it's a very core feature to building that data mesh pattern as well. Because if you have all these teams working independently, how can they blend the data together but still maintain the accurate copy of the data, have the trustworthy data? Well, you leave that data in the ownership of the domain, and then you create these shortcuts so that when the domain owner is updating the data, if they have new changes coming to the data, it's automatically going to be seen by all of the consumers of that data through the shortcut. And that really enables you to build that data mesh architecture where you have all the connection lines between your different domains. And that, is what I'm talking about now is connecting data that's already in OneLake, but shortcuts also enable you to bring data from other storage services like Azure ADLS, or even other cloud services like Amazon S3 and Google Cloud Storage, so that you can keep one copy of data, shortcut it into OneLake, and then you can start accessing it through all the different Fabric engines. It looks just like it was stored in OneLake. And if it's already in Delta Parquet, it's even better. So you can start, seeing it as a table and using all the engines on top of the Delta table as well. And the list of shortcut sources we support has been growing very quickly since we've released shortcuts. We recently have announced support for shortcuts to Amazon S3 compatible APIs, which unlocks lots of different storage locations. And then also shortcuts to on-premise sources is coming soon as well. And see if there's any other points I need to make here. Yeah, as I mentioned before, it looks and feels like it's in OneLake, so that you can actually refer to it using the same namespace, using the same ADLS APIs that you would as if you had just written that data directly to OneLake. Okay, I see a question. How can we convert existing data or tables to Parquet format? So in the Lakehouse, there's a few different options. If you have the data in CSV format, and I don't know if they have other file formats they support now, but there's an option that says convert to table in the UX. That's one way that you can trigger a job to convert it to Delta Lake. There are the pipelines in the Fabric ADF offering that will convert data into Delta Lake format. You can run Spark notebooks to convert it. I think those are some of the most common tools for converting data to Parquet format, or Delta Parquet format. Okay, is access management to those external sources manages? Okay, so how shortcuts will work is that the person who's bringing the data in has access to that data in external service, and they create the shortcut and do it with an identity or a key that provides access to that specific folder in that account that they want to shortcut in. And then access to that shortcut is managed through the Fabric security controls or access controls. So someone has to have permission to get into the lakehouse and read that data, and then they can see the shortcut. But the shortcut access is done through the identity that the person who created the shortcut assigned to that. So it's a delegated access model. That's for the external shortcuts. For internal shortcuts between OneLake locations, it's a pass-through model. So you get authorized to the data in the source location of the shortcut. And we have a bunch of doc pages on this that go into this in more detail. So I have a short URL link at my end slide to the docs, but definitely encourage you to check those out to get some more details on how the access control model works as well. So let me show some demos here. So let's see if this is going to start. Here we have before I get too far, a very, it's just an example table we have here with one row, very simple table, but of course we support any size table you want, and you should load as much data as you can. But just say in this warehouse, I have, I think it's business KPIs warehouse. I have a sales table here, and then I'm going to switch to another location, finance lake house, and I want to bring that sales table in from that other location I was talking about. Well, I go and I create a new shortcut, and here I'll see an internal Microsoft OneLake tile, and we have a bunch of other news sources that are available that are just not on this recording. So when you go and try it out, you'll see a bunch of new options, and then I can browse all the lake houses and warehouses I have access to. And I'll pick that one that or I can also filter by domains as well. If I want to bring in sales data, I can look at the sales domain and see, oh, it's been certified, so I should use this for my analysis. And I'll pick that warehouse we were just looking at before, the business KPIs warehouse. And I'll look at all the tables that are available there. And there's that sales table. I select that, and then I create the shortcut. And then simple as that, the shortcut's been created. And now in my lakehouse, I see the sales table here, and it's not making a copy of the data. It's a link to that original table. So if new data gets added, I'll immediately see it in my lakehouse as well. So it's a very quick process to set up shortcuts. And so that's an internal shortcut. Let's say I have some data that I want to bring in from external locations like S3. Oh, I think it's playing the same one here. I'm going to go to my S3 bucket, and here I have some data that could have been written out by Databricks or any other service, and I see it's in Delta Parquet format, so that's wonderful. So I'm going to copy the path to this data, and I'm going to go back and create a shortcut, and then I'll pick the Amazon S3. And right in this recording, we're manually entering in the URL to the data, but recently we've released new features for all the shortcut types, which allow you to browse the storage accounts, even external storage accounts. So the experience is improved for all shortcut types. But in this recording, you put in the URL, you put in the access key to the data, and you can assign whatever shortcut name you want to appear in your Fabric Lakehouse. And you click shortcut, and now you have S3 data in your lakehouse, and it looks, just like any other Delta table. And the metadata is going to be discovered by all the different engines, so you can start running. I think the next video talks about it. Let me get to this one. you can, okay, before I get to that point, you can update your data in a shortcut. So I'm in the business KPIs warehouse. I'm inserting a second row of this data. So the owner of the data updated it. I can go back to my lake house and I'll see if I select all the rows, I see that second new update there immediately because there's no copy of data. Oh, I thought, okay. So I was going to make a point here that like even for this S3 data that we had put in our lakehouse, you can run the SQL queries, you can run or create Power BI dashboards, run Spark jobs all over this data because it's in Delta Parquet format. Since it's all these engines are supporting this open source format that really enables all of the powerful experiences across Fabric to work together. Okay, let me check any new questions. Are shortcuts read, write, or just read? So the OneLake shortcuts are read, write, and ADL shortcuts are as well. S3 shortcuts are just read only for the time being. And I think the other external shortcuts are also read only. So it varies by shortcut type. And I think, they're open to hearing feedback on what you would like to have supported on these shortcuts as well. So if you have any questions on a specific type, I would point you to the documentation and we'll clarify if it's read only or read write, and then share. Definitely reach out to me if you have any questions or want to share any feedback or scenarios with us on shortcuts. All right, I think to show this video. Yes. Oh yeah, and this slide is talking about how we have new shortcut sources with Google Cloud Storage just recently announced, Amazon S3 compatible, and shortcuts to on-prem is coming soon. And S3 compatible shortcuts or S3 compatible APIs are, widely popular APIs. And so now that we have support for that, that means you can bring in data from all these different data sources as well. So it hopefully will unlock a bunch of new data to be brought into Fabric. And also this new UI experience that I mentioned before. So it's very easy to look into your ADLS account, browse all your folders without having to copy and paste a specific path to the data. So I think this is actually the end of my main section of the slides, but I have some slides in the appendix too, which I can go into as well. But this might be also, since I mentioned docs a couple of times, it's a good point for me to say, like, you can get to our docs quickly through aka.ms/OneLake docs. And just last week, or maybe the week before, we released a white paper on OneLake. So I think it's a great overview of the architecture and the strategy and design of OneLake. So I encourage everyone to check it out as well. And you can get to it from aka.ms/openlakes as well if you haven't seen it. So I think I have some time to take some questions now. And some other slides we can get into, but let's take a pause maybe to see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, any questions you have, you can come off mute if you'd like to ask, or continue to put them in the chat. Elizabeth can see the chat as well. And I'm typing in the links that are in her slides for your convenience.
Hi, yeah, this is Himanshu here. Thanks, it was a great presentation. I was just wondering, because these days everybody's talking about AI and data. Like basically, I work. I have my own company, and then I do consulting work, mostly on the cloud services. So I was wondering how this can be integrated with the Azure AI Studio or the AI services, OneLake. Is that if you have any insights or real world use cases there to talk about?
I do know they have support for data in OneLake. In fact, I think I have a slide for it. Let me see if I can pull it up. Give me 1 second. I saw it recently. I think that this slide does a better job than I could to summarize it. Okay, give me 1 second. So yeah, I think we have AI Studio and also Azure ML offerings, and they all have integrated with OneLake to provide the ability to use their services on top of OneLake. And I think both you can use it as a data source, read files and tables. And I think, yeah, it looks like there's just maybe a couple areas where maybe there's still some integrations that haven't been supported yet. But I think you have shortcuts supported. They're integrated together, and I hope that helps give you some idea of what's possible and encourage you to go try it out. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me and I can help.
Yeah, sure. And sure. And also one more question from the real world experiences. So earlier I have worked on a project where we migrated data from on-premise, like 100 terabytes of data to ADLS storage too, and then that time we were, coming up with a design or architecting it, how we can do it. Say, for example, we spend some time using AZ copy, then we spend some time, Azure provides, I think, the hardware boxes. I don't recollect the exact name, where you provide about 8 like some specific hardware boxes where you can actually plug it to the data center, and then it helps to copy the data. So in this, so what is the best cases where we can, that's the real world, where the company still, they have their data sitting in an on-premise data centers and they want to move their data to the cloud. So so the cloud services like Synapse or Databricks or ML, they can use that data. So how do you ingest that data from on-prem to using this platform OneLake?
Well, if they don't want to move it and they want to keep it there and just try things out, we now have the support to shortcut to on-prem data sources coming soon. So that might be an easy first step that I mentioned before. And I think definitely if they can access it through S3 compatible APIs, then they can shortcut to on-prem data sources using an on-prem data gateway, the same one they might have set up for Power BI if they're using Power BI. But so I would first see, I guess, do they need to move the data over, or are they doing it just so they can try it out with Fabric? If it's just to try it out, then shortcuts could be the right option there. But if they do want to migrate the data, then Data Factory would be the solution for that. But then, yeah, getting into the kind of options and choices you might have in Data Factory to move large scale data, I would kind of look to the Data Factory team to advise you the best on that one.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I have looked at the Data Factory, because the challenges there is that then you have to come up with your own integration run times, the bottleneck about the performance, where the data is getting copied from on-prem to Azure cloud, correct? So for example, if you talk about moving 100 terabytes of data, how much time is going to take? It might take, if you are doing with express route, so the network will come into picture. Probably it might take, I think when we estimated it, probably it might take 3 weeks or 4 weeks to move 100 terabytes of data, correct? So, but yeah, so, but this is a good point, where instead of actually moving the data, we can create a shortcut and then actually tap into that data, correct? Even though the data might be residing in an on-premise. To be very practical, we had this Teradata where we had big data Hadoop data where we wanted to copy. So we use AZ copy and all that, so where you can copy from source to destination. But then I'm sure that was 3 or 4 years back. Now we have a better way of doing it. So like shortcut might be the one way of actually looking at the data and then so.
Yeah, depends on I guess how much data are they going to
There
be
was a
processing?
service where there was a service where you back up on-prem and someone drive it to the location and they upload
Yeah,
it.
data box, I think is what you're.
Yeah, data box
thinking.
was the
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know kind of the latest on data box, but yeah, I know that's one of the potential options. But shortcuts on-prem, you're not actually copying the data, so you do still have like the law of physics of like you're going over networks and things like that. So keep that in mind. Like you can do that for some use cases. It may not be the right one if you're trying to process 200 terabytes of data, over a regular cadence, that might be better for moving that data once over into OneLake. But, if you're joining some data sets across different services and those data sets are getting updated and you don't want to have to maintain copies of it, then that might be a better fit for shortcuts in that scenario.
If I could just add a little bit, Himanshu,
Yes, please go ahead.
for your data movement, you might actually find most of the techniques you're used to, you could still use, because almost anything you could land in a storage account in Azure, you could then access from a Fabric instance sort of directly. In fact, you wouldn't even need to necessarily move it into the Fabric storage. You could use that data, in a storage account if that's where you're already moving it. So I wouldn't, necessarily think that you have to do things very differently. There are more things like shortcuts. On-prem data connector is supported. You could leverage that within Fabric. So I think the way I would think about Fabric is really opening up more options, but not precluding things you're used to doing if they're already efficient.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and also just one more last question on this. Since this is a Parquet or a Delta format, so I believe it out of the box it supports the CDC, change data capture, correct? So suppose if I move the data or create a data for like say 10 GB, which has got 100K records. So when I want to do upsearch, it will automatically take care of that, correct? CDC out of the box or something like that.
Sorry, unfortunately, I would need to check with some of our analytics partners on this one. I don't feel confident enough to confirm that. I mean, if it's something that's open
what's
source.
What's your data source for your CDC that you're thinking about?
CDC is it can be anything. So say for example, in a real world where we like going to the earlier way of creating our BI pipelines, correct? So we get the data. So we create a job where we get data from different sources. Say for example, MySQL server or like Oracle servers, correct, databases. Or like sometimes the file-based file server, correct? The files, they are in CSV format. And then we have a job where we insert it using Data Factory. Then we insert it into a SQL server, Azure SQL server in the cloud, correct? So that is for day one. And then we don't, and then again, the new data comes from the source, correct? And then our pipeline runs schedule or something like that. We don't want to do the bulk copy, correct? So the best way of just capturing or inserting or upsetting records which are only change, correct? That is the use case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, CDC and Fabric is mostly used within mirroring, which is supported with Snowflake and Cosmos DB, I think, right now, and possibly Azure SQL DB. But I would look into mirroring as a place to
Come
start.
again, sorry, what is that? Mirroring, M-I-R-R-O?
Yeah, I have a slide on that.
like a mirror on the wall.
Okay.
Yeah. So mirroring uses CDC to in real time replicate using CDC from source databases, and Snowflake is the one I use the most. I think that would tie into this use case the best.
Yeah, so mirroring is the services on Azure or it's just a concept mirroring?
It's a Fabric feature. So
Yeah.
you would go to a Fabric data warehouse and say create a mirror and point it to like Snowflake or something, and then it would keep things in sync.
Yeah, so bringing data into OneLake is we have the options I mentioned before. Those are ways to interact with other file system services. We can shortcut to anything that's a file system, but if it's in a proprietary format, in a database, we can't shortcut to it and understand that storage. So mirroring is a way you can bring that data in. It will create a copy and keep it updated, and then bring it in and write it into Delta Lake format in OneLake. So then you can start consuming it through all the Fabric experiences. And yeah, we have Cosmos DB, SQL DB, and Snowflake support right now. And the actual storage is free up to like very high quantities, and the writing into Fabric on the Fabric side is free. So it's definitely an option I would encourage everyone to look at to bring in data that you can't shortcut to directly. You can use this mirroring feature. I think that's
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
And then I have a couple slides on domains too I can go into as well. There's another team that works on the domains feature, so I will represent their work as much as possible, but this can give you a better idea of how domains work. And like I mentioned, you use it and you assign workspaces to domains. You create a domain admin. You can have settings on the domain level. So say you don't want the tenant admin to have to decide on some settings for everyone in the tenant, they can delegate it down to the domain level. And if you're in the admin portal, you'll go here and you'll see this domain section where you'll create your domains that you want to have in your tenant. And then you can assign admins. And then once you open a domain, you can do fun things like create a cover image. So when you're searching for what workspaces, you see a cover image. You can have, yeah, this one is default domain. So I think they'll automatically be signed to a domain. You can allow the domain admin to certify data, or you can enable it or not enable it. See what other fun things are showing here. Here's where you actually tie the workspaces to the domain. So she's picking Lakehouse Test, and she's assigning it to the HR domain. So it's now in that domain. And there's also a new feature called subdomains. So you have even another level that you can classify things. So if the HR department wants to create an HR Europe subdomain, they can, and put workspaces under that. You can move workspaces to different domains. Or move it to the subdomain that she just created. And then OneLake Data Hub is the best place for you to discover data that's available to you. And you can, at the top, filter for all the data or workspaces in different domains. And so that's a really great way for organizations to encourage people to find data in different domains and pick domains that are certified and just be able to explore all the different assets that are available to them. And I think it's almost like a catalog of data, and there'll be new features, coming in OneLake Data Hub over time. And this is just going to be a great place to have that central view of all of your data in OneLake. I think this talks about kind of the things that we were looking at in the demo. This is another demo recording. I think I won't play this one, but I hope that give you a little bit better idea of domains as well. So I think it's one of the great new features that really enable you to keep your data more organized, not let it get into a data swamp, and hopefully make it easier on people to classify their data. Let's see, and let me see if there are any other good topics we can talk about, or if anyone has any questions. Or I also mentioned.
Can you throw some lights on the security aspects, because these days for an enterprise, security is the #1 priority. So what are the best practices for the security here? So because when I talk to my clients, they ask what are the best practices for the security, and we spend a lot of time on even the architecting security for the data. So yeah.
Great.
And it's a timely subject too. Sorry to cut in. I received during this presentation, I received an email notification from Dell notifying me of a data breach that impacts me and millions of others.
Okay.
So top of mind.
Yeah. And I was just thinking that I should talk about the slides I have in my appendix about this one as well. So, OneLake since the beginning had different ways to control access. You had workspace access control. You can share out different artifacts at the item level. Share out items at the item level. But we just recently announced having fine-grained access control on the folder level using the feature called OneLake Data Access Roles. So.
Well, maybe in a bigger scale.
I don't know if that was a question for me.
Free access to all your Linux servers.
Okay.
Now it's another data breach in another company, right? So it's not just the user access of us, but the security against all these hijacking backdoors that are happening.
Okay. I think I may kind of have a feeling of what kind of features you're thinking of for that scenario. But let me get to that topic after I first explain a little bit about this feature that is. So I think this is the current state of what I was just mentioning. We have workspace level access control. Different compute engines have the ability to define access through their experiences, like the warehouse or the semantic models. And then you had item level access as well. But what's new is this folder level access, which uses a role-based model. It's not POSIX that Azure ADLS and storage support today. We intentionally deviated from that to use this role-based access control. And you can go into your Lakehouse. I don't know if I have a demo. I don't think I do. You go into your Lakehouse, you say create data access role, and then you create a role, you pick a folder, and then you can assign people to that role. And now you have fine-grained access control on the folder level in your Lakehouse, and it inherits the permission so that if you create new folders underneath it, it automatically will take that permission. And so it's a little bit more manageable than the POSIX system is. So that's a new feature that just was released, and there'll be more coming. Security is a huge focus area for the OneLake team. Our vision is to get to a point where you can define all of your security and access control on the data lake level and have all the engines enforce that. So you don't have to define policies in separate engines. You can have, row level security, column level security defined in the data lake, the OneLake level. And define it once, have one security policy there, and have it be enforced everywhere on top. But as this is rolling out in stages, what we have released recently is this folder level access control. But talking about like protecting against data breaches, I would love to hear, I guess, your kind of thoughts around what you would like to see from Fabric and OneLake, around these kind of scenarios. ADLS has this backup, or Azure Storage has this backup feature, which it allows you to create copies of your data and put it into like a vaulted storage account. So that would be, more protected against, anyone trying to, take data. But I guess that's one scenario. If you have any thoughts on this area, I would love to discuss it more.
Soft deletes in ADLS. Yeah, with the third, I think it's, what is it, 15-day retention by default, but with the ability to extend that if you wanted to, that would be a great feature.
Okay, so yeah, so where we are right now with soft deletes is we have workspace level soft delete, I think 7-day, if I remember correctly, and you can extend it higher. But we do now in the file level have APIs to delete data. So right now, all of your data in OneLake is kept, like we have soft delete enabled, and so you can restore your files with the same APIs that you would use on an ADLS account to undelete data. Right now, we are defining that retention period for you, and we will, in the coming releases, enable you to control the retention period. That's something we have on our near-term roadmap. But right now, what we enable you to do is to restore data at this point in time.
And also, I believe the data will be secured using SSL certs, correct? Like at rest and like over the network, of course, with the key-based security or customer managed security, correct?
Well, if we get into specifics, I would have to go double check.
Okay.
I think we have something in our docs on this. Let me see if I can find it.
That was a good one, the soft deletes. I didn't know that, so thank you for that. So
it's relatively new, so that's probably why.
Is Microsoft after the latest, where open source were modified to grant access to Linux, is Microsoft taking steps to review every open source code that is bringing into their platforms?
This is a good question. I would, want to. I probably loop in some other folks to give you a good answer on this one.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Because as the OneLake team, we love data. Bring any data from any source, and we will happily take it. But yeah, having standardizing on Delta format. I know there's different nuances to Delta and all those things, and that's not my area of expertise. So I could definitely connect you though if you want to learn more.
Don't worry, Lisa. Don't worry.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, and I see Dan is indicating that that OneLake security could probably be its own entire topic.
Yeah.
At some point in the future. And Raul is asking, can you apply access control at the domain hierarchy level?
No, not that I'm aware of. Let me just double check. No, I think it gives you like the ability to assign workspaces to domains and certify data, but it's not an access control level concept. You have workspaces, items, and now folders. So yeah.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
Okay, so maybe at this point we can officially close out the meeting and thank Elizabeth Oldag so much for her time and her expertise in this presentation tonight. And if you want to stick around for a few more minutes and ask additional questions, feel free to do so. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you at a future meeting. And
Well, thank you.
back to questions for Elizabeth. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And you can come off mute if you would like and ask directly if you have additional questions.
There was a question about cost. Joe asked. See that?
Yes.
Did I miss the
How
answer?
How do we determine the upfront cost and manage the cost? Got it. Yeah, so the fabric billing model has two components. You have compute costs, and then you have the storage cost in OneLake. The storage cost in OneLake is straightforward, so I'll describe that first. You pay for the data that you use. It's a pay-as-you-go model, per gigabyte price, and it's on par with ADLS costs. And then the compute aspect. So in Fabric, instead of having to buy separate capacity and estimate what capacity you need for all the different engines like Spark and Warehouse and Kusto, they all are combined so that you buy one Fabric capacity, and then you can use that capacity with any of the engines that you want. So there's I think different ways to estimate it, but we have trial capacities that are free, so you can get a sense of what you're trying to do. Look at the Capacity Metrics app, which is a way for you to monitor the usage in your workspaces, and you can get a feel for like, okay, this kind of workload is going to consume this much of my capacity, and then you can figure out what scale capacity you want. But there's probably like a dozen different capacity sizes, and you can move between the sizes as you need. The transactions to OneLake are going to consume your capacity, so you don't have a separate bill for transactions like you would if you're using storage or ADLS. You would have just your data at rest cost, and then you would have your Fabric capacity cost as well. There's a couple of good blog posts about the Fabric capacity model that I can put in the chat too, if you haven't seen them. I find those pretty helpful. Does that answer your question, Joe?
So yeah, so
He
Himanshu
says
here.
yes, thanks.
Yeah, I have one question. So looks like we are going ahead with the Microsoft Fabric. So what is the plan for the other technologies computing? Is that they're going to sunset it? What is the product roadmap? Say for a company who wants to, like implement this. So they want to have long-term support and things like that, correct? So.
Okay, I think so. Are you talking about like Synapse as an example?
Yeah, Synapse or like Databricks, Azure Databricks, and those kind of computing. Because when we design a solution for the clients, they ask what is the computing technology like Databricks, Synapse, Data Factory, custom tools. So the Fabric, and so what is the long-term roadmap for this and other computing technologies?
Yeah, I think the Synapse is still supported, and we're still supporting that service. It's I think in general, like the I guess the long-term roadmap would be a good topic for someone above my pay grade on some of these things. But I could just tell you, like, there's no plans to change the Synapse world. We are still supporting Synapse as a service, the same team. So we want to have that support there for users on Synapse, and then also have all the new features coming into Fabric as well. But yeah, I think this would be a good meaty topic to get into, probably with some more folks involved as well.
I suspect it would require NDAs that are not available to most of the people on the call to get the roadmap you're really looking for, Himanshu.
No, like sometimes, the companies like they want to know, correct, when they
Absolutely.
invest their time and resources in some certain technologies, they want to know. Of course, that's why they go with companies like Microsoft, because they know they will be having a long-term support, correct? So yeah, so because these companies I've worked with, they are very, very heavily involved in the data science, data engineering projects there. So, and especially with the AI coming in, data for them is the key to all these companies. Okay. So, for example, I worked lot with retail and the healthcare. So for them, retail and healthcare, they generate data every day, lots of data every day. So that's why. And some of the data in the healthcare world is like really different data, like chromosomes, XY, so that's why. So yeah, but it was very good presentation. It was very helpful to know certain Fabric things. Yeah, because honestly, with the data engineering world, things are changing very, very fast. Every 6 months, you see the whole technology stacks is changing rapidly, very, very fast. Whether it's open source, AWS, Azure, Google, and the other players, it's like tremendous changes are happening. And I foresee with the AI coming in to hands of developers with the Copilot and other things, it's going to be faster, like 10x or 50x times faster, the development for everything.
Yeah.
So yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was nice.
Good to hear. That was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's so many other topics for future sessions, like for like OneLake security, shortcuts. It's just a big area that you could definitely dive deep into. So definitely, if there's interest in other areas, we can bring in more folks from OneLake as well.
Yeah, maybe the healthcare data will be challenging, because healthcare, if somebody or healthcare, like especially when we do with disease management or actual research data, how to manage that, because I can give you a real world scenario where the healthcare data is generated, so much data is generated, and those are not in a standard formats. They want to crunch it, using different pandas data frames and all that. So they want, so that will be good, I think, healthcare data sets as well. So the genome analysis and all that, liver diseases and all that. So
okay. Yeah.
Okay. Any last questions before we adjourn for the evening?
Thank you all. You have a good day.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me.